Want to go to our original story now that we were going to discuss with Christian Mccaffrey? Let's get into it. So back in May, Stephen A., you reacted to Christian McCaffrey's comments in Sports Illustrated that many underestimate him because of the eye test.
If he were black, he would get talked about differently. He makes a very valid point. There's no reason for anybody to be up in arms for what he's saying. Christian McCaffrey deserves more respect, more recognition than he is receiving.
Okay.
And he's not receiving it because, believe it or not, I can't believe I'm saying it. He is a white guy that is not receiving it because of the color of his skin and the position that he plays.
Well, the Heisman runner-up told ESPN the magazine that Stephen A. rescued the discussion. Quote, "It was a relief. I couldn't have said it better." So Clemson quarterback Deshaun Watson had similar comments, telling Bleacher Report that he thinks black quarterbacks are stereotyped. People think, quote, "Oh, he's a black quarterback. He must be dual threat." People throw around that word all the time. People have assumed that I have to run the ball before I can throw it most of my career. All the way back before high school, it's a stereotype put on me for a long time because I'm African-American and I'm a dual threat quarterback. Stephen A., what does this say about society?
It says that we still have a long way to go. And believe it or not, it says something that we as black people are very reluctant and reticent to recognize, but it's the absolute truth, that prejudice exists on both sides of the coin. What I would educate people about is that there's a difference between prejudice and racism. Racism essentially is when you inherently believe in a level of superiority or inferiority based on somebody's ethnicity, race, etc., etc. And I certainly have never met a black person who felt that way, that they were superior to somebody just because they're black. Obviously, our country has proven that there have been a bevy of white people who obviously think differently than that. But when it comes to prejudices, I think we're all tainted to some degree by that. Nobody's immune from it. Nobody can be absolved from it. And I think that in this particular situation, it proves the point. In the case of Deshaun Watson, he's absolutely right with what he said, considering the greatness that he has put on display, particularly last season. You know, the expectation that he is supposed to rely on his athleticism and his running ability to be as effective as he can be, because nobody could just judge him as being a pure quarterback, etc., who's just going to stand in the pocket and fling that football, even though this was a problem that existed with the likes of a Warren Moon, who debunked all of that and proved himself throughout his Hall of Fame career, first in the CFL and then in the NFL. It's still a stereotype that black quarterbacks have said they still battle. So Deshaun Watson isn't bringing anything new to the table. He's just validating what has reverberated throughout society for decades now. In the case of Christian McCaffrey, let me be the first to say what I said months ago. If he were white, he would be getting more attention. This man rushed for over
You mean if he was black?
If he was black, I'm sorry. If he were black, he would be getting more attention. As a white guy in the United States of America, this guy is actually being, diminished to some degree. Now, some people would use the excuse that I think if I remember correctly, is Jim Taylor or somebody like that, the last white running back to lead the NFL in rushing. Okay, so you might prognosticate, look forward and say, well, this guy at 6 feet, only 201 pounds, what is he going to be on the NFL level? Blah, 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 blah. Well, let's pump the brakes. He's not on the NFL level yet. He's in college, and he is not some average player. For collegiate purposes, Christian McCaffrey is a superstar on the collegiate level. He is a superstar at a superstar caliber institution from an academic perspective, that is Stanford. And I think to some degree, he's being victimized because of that. He's being victimized because he's at Stanford. He's being victimized because he is white, playing the running back position. And I don't think it's fair. You rushed for 2,019 yards. You averaged 6 yards a carry. In the Pac-12, you deserve hype. Now, he was a Heisman candidate, no doubt about it, but still in all, we weren't talking about him nearly as much as a nation, as a nation of sports nation, no pun intended. We were not talking about this kid nearly as much as we should. And the part that I think makes it even more egregious, that even though his father was a wide receiver, his father had NFL pedigree. His father proved that he belonged on the next level playing with John Elway's and those boys. His father represented the NFL. So by virtue of that alone, to look at his son perform the way that this young man performed, we should be giving him more recognition. And I will say this to Christian McCaffrey. If you perform this year the way you performed last year, I personally promise you, we will be mentioning you a lot on this show because we will not ignore. I'm a fair-minded guy. And this guy, this white dude at Stanford, as a running back, deserves at this moment far more respect and adulation than he has received.
Not just a running back, he's a receiver, too. I mean, when you think about him on the next level, you think, could he be LaDainian Thomas? Well, that's one of the greatest players of all time. But, like, let's talk about a guy like Dave Meggett, one of these Weapon X type guys in the sense that he can help you in so many different ways. He can carry the ball a bunch of times.
You went real deep there. Who the hell remembers Dave Meggett? I know you do. He deserves to be remembered.
Giants,
but who the hell's thinking about it?
Giants. But the point is, Meggett could run the ball. He could catch the ball. He could return kicks. He could help you in a variety of ways. As a result, he was never going to lead the league in rushing or anything like that. But he was a Pro Bowler. He was that level player. And I look at McCaffrey, I think he could maybe do the same thing. Marcellus Wiley used to talk about this on Sports Nation and on our radio show about how in the running backs line, you know, and in the cornerbacks line, you see a white guy and the coaches would start giving him, you know, giving him the business. They'd be making fun of him, stuff like, oh boy, you know, because it's not just lazy thinking. The way we're wired is to make stereotypes. It's to make generalizations because it helps us process information quickly. It helps us understand the world.
Doesn't make it right, though.
Of course not. That can work against us, and it can lead to lazy thinking where people see Deshaun Watson and go, running back. No, he's a quarterback. Now, the irony in Deshaun Watson's case is he is a dual threat, you know, like, but he can do more than just run. He can obviously throw and complete passes and all that stuff, but he is a dual threat. And I also think that in terms of McCaffrey and the reception of him and the coverage of him, I think that tide will turn, Stephen A., because there's something about, just as we can generalize and make snap judgments and stereotype at times as a result, we also like it when we see someone who breaks stereotype. We like it when we see the white running back or cornerback because we don't see it all the time. And until recently, where now it's become commonplace, a black quarterback was something we discussed a lot because there weren't a lot of black quarterbacks. Not that there couldn't have been, but the reality was they weren't given the opportunity, etc. So when you saw one, you wanted to celebrate it. Look at that, something that breaks a pernicious stereotype. That's a good thing. And I think that's going to start working for McCaffrey over time this season.
You're right. But the reason why it's so important, particularly on a show like this, to bring up Christian McCaffrey is because we never hesitate to point out unfairness. And it's usually aimed in the direction of minorities, whether it be African American or somebody else. We talk about Native Americans. We talk about African Americans. We'll talk about Latinos. It does not matter because we're for the underdog on First Take. Let's just call it what it is. Right. And by and large, the sports world is that way in today's age as well. White hosts, black hosts, it don't matter. We've become a society where even though we say that we root for the underdog, we really, really have elevated that stature in today's day and age. So guess what? We're looking at Christian McCaffrey, and because he's white, and because he's at a pristine institution like Stanford, we're not viewing him as an underdog. But in this particular instance, he is an underdog. Because these kind of things, if we're willing to point out the liabilities, if we're willing to prognosticate what he won't be, and we're willing to do that ad nauseum, then what we're doing is taking those prejudices and leaping them on his shoulders and therefore making it hard for him. Now, there's a lot of black folks that'll be like, damn that, what's the problem? We got to deal with that every day. And that's right. But the problem is that if you want to alleviate that level of prejudice that's aimed in our direction, make sure we don't exercise it with somebody else. In the case of Christian McCaffrey, he does not deserve this. He deserves better than what we as a sports world have given him in the last year.
This is what I love about This is what I love about sports. The closest thing to a pure meritocracy in this country. I mean, it doesn't matter who your daddy is, how much money you have. If you can't hit the curveball, you can't stay in the major leagues. That's just the way it is. And just a word to the wise for those who would, for whatever reason, root against McCaffrey. To me, so far, based on what I've seen, that's a losing proposition.
Yep.
Listen. Ultimate compliment to the white guy known as Christian McCaffrey. You're a bad brother. You're a bad brother.
I don't think that
he's a bad brother.
Put it in perspective.
He's a bad brother.
His 2019 rush yards last season, the most in FBS history by a running back who ever came back to school the following year.
And 45 receptions for 645 yards.
He's dangerous out of the backfield.
And he appreciated you having his back, Stephen A., calling you out personally. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.